Today I wanted to read to you a book that I like to read in the month of February, and it's called George Washington's Teeth. And this is about two different themes that are important in February. The first one is Dental Health Month. Is the month of February, and also because we have President's Day in the month of February, and George Washington was our very first president. So we're going to read this book today and find out about George Washington's teeth. All of his life, George Washington had problems with his teeth and worked hard to save them. This story is based on what really happened to George and his teeth. I wonder if George took care of his teeth, brushed his teeth, and went to see a dentist. The Revolutionary War, George hoped would soon be won, but another battle with his teeth had only just begun. The Revolutionary War was a war between the United States and England. The United States was a part of England, and they wanted to be free and be their own country. And George Washington was a general in the Revolutionary War. George Washington rushed into town. The dentist heard his shout. "Hold still," he said, then gave a yank. A rotten tooth popped out. So here's George Washington in the dentist chair. It looks different than the dentist chairs we have now, doesn't it? All that night, George tossed and moaned. Another tooth was sore. But at the dawn, he saddled up and galloped off to war. He's on his way to help fight in the Revolutionary War. He's telling his wife goodbye. This is a picture of how he's feeling so bad with his teeth. George reached New York as British ships invaded every port. Preparing for a fierce attack, his soldiers built a fort. If you look closely right here, you can see the fort. You can see the American flag flying there, so we know that it's an American fort. Inside, he rubbed his swollen gums with soothing oil of myrrh, until a Centennial cried out, "Here come the British, sir." Charging on the field, George thought, "There's something in my mouth." He spat into his handkerchief. Another tooth came out. "This can't be happening," George gasped. "What if someone should see? If word got out I'm losing teeth, my men would laugh at me." Now, like I said before, was a general in the Revolutionary War, and so he led a lot of men. They were under him. He was their general, and so he didn't want them to laugh at him for losing his teeth. While no one looked, he wrote a note his dentist would receive. "Please come," it said. "I'll need your help when I get home on leave." So what do you think he needs help with? He contacted his dentist, so I bet he needs help with taking care of his teeth. Back at home, George lost more teeth, till he had only 10. Have you got more than 10 teeth? "Oh, Martha dear," George cried, "I fear I'll never eat again." She fed him mush and pickled tripe, but when guests came to dine, he sneaked one of his favorite nuts. Then he had only 9. What do you think happened to that last tooth? He was eating a nut, and I bet it made his tooth pop out and broke his tooth. George crossed the icy Delaware with 9 teeth in his mouth. In that cold and pitchy dark, 2 more teeth came out. So he's crossing the Delaware River, And while he's crossing it, it's very cold and it looks wet. And anyway, while they were in that boat, 2 more teeth came out. So he had 9, and now he's down to 7. Snowfell and George at Valley Forge, his blue coat hung in tatters. By then he had only 7 teeth that couldn't even chatter. Yet bravely George led forth his men, coat and pigtail flying. While cannons boomed, he held his jaw and groaned, "I think I'm dying." His teeth are hurting. His 7 teeth. The redcoats fled. George won the war. When he returned alive, Martha checked for 7 teeth, but counted only 5. So how many more teeth has George lost? He's lost 2 more teeth. He had 7. That's his wife. She was counting, hoping to find 7 teeth in his mouth, but there were only 5. He hid the evening of her ball, ashamed his friends would see. That night the dentist came again. George had lost another 3. So how many teeth is he down to now? That's right, 2 teeth. Poor George had 2 teeth in his mouth the day the votes came in. The people had a president, but one afraid to grin. He didn't want to grin because he didn't want anyone seeing that all of his teeth were falling out. A portrait artist came to George. He said, "I know a trick. I'll pad your mouth with cotton balls to puff your sunken lips." George stood up to have a look. He fell back on his fanny. "It doesn't look like me," he roared. "It looks like Martha's granny." He yanked the cotton from his mouth, then gasped, "What have I done?" The cotton held a rotten tooth. Now George had only 1. Well, George is down to 1 tooth in his mouth. George still had that tooth. The night a knock came at the door. "I've brought false teeth," the dentist called, "teeth that won't get sore." George put them in, but when he smiled, springs snapped against his tongue. Out flew those teeth. George shrieked, "They've knocked out my last one." So how many teeth does George have now? No teeth. George is toothless. "Oh, no," George moaned, "I'm toothless." He kept his mouth shut tight. He couldn't sleep. He paced the floor and prayed with all his might. "If only I had teeth," thought George. He pondered what to do. "Aha," he cried, "all my old teeth might help make something new." So what do you think George is going to do with all of his old teeth if he's able to find them? Okay, let's find out what George is planning. He searched Mount Vernon, bedchambers, the pantry, parlors, halls, through shelves, desk drawers, and musty floor of every horse's stall. George found no teeth. Alas, they're gone. A great sob shook his shoulders. Through tears he peered in one last chest, leaped up and yelled, "My molars!" With plaster and those teeth he found, George poured a sample mold that showed the dentist how to make false teeth George hoped would hold. The dentist took strong hippo tusk and carved a set to size, each tooth secured with screws of gold that lit up George's eyes. So he's going to have his teeth made from hippo tusk, and they have screws that are made of gold in them. Can you guess the story's end? Those new teeth fit just right. And round the ballroom with his friends, George danced all through the night. That's the end of the story. But then we have a timeline that tells us things that really happened in George's life. And it says that he was born on a farm in Virginia, and then he lost 2 teeth by the time he was 22 years old. And so it gives us a timeline of when he became the president, when he was a general in the Revolutionary War. And here down at the very bottom, look what we have. 2 views of George's last set of dentures. And they were made by a doctor named Dr. Greenwood. Those were what his teeth looked like at the end. They were made from a sheet of gold and springs made of gold wire. And just so we can look, there's a portrait that you may have seen before of George. Let me find if I can get it up here. Of George Washington. See that portrait of George Washington? He may look familiar. See, he's not smiling. He's keeping his mouth closed so you can't see that he's missing teeth. All right, that was a good story. And this book was written by Deborah Chander and Madeline Camaro. The pictures were by Brock Cole. Have a great day.